Welcome back, PetaPixel viewers. It is another Technicals with Chris Nichols. Today we're talking about the brand new software updates that just came out for Final Cut Pro, both for the iPad and the desktop. So I'm going to be talking about the iPad version because that's what I use. Jordan will be here to talk about the desktop version as well. Let's get to it. So the updates have just launched, but of course we've had them a little bit early so that we can test them out and give our findings on them. So first off, let's talk about Final Cut Pro for iPad. Three main changes that I think are worth pointing out. So first off, this is a pretty small one. If I've got B-roll clips on the top layer, I can now group them together as compound clips and just makes it easier to organize them, move them around, that kind of stuff. Now the update also brings some brand new color grading presets, titles, and generators, but they weren't available for testing before the update launch, but now that it's out, they're all yours. So another thing the updates addressed, when Final Cut Pro for the iPad first came out, it was missing any sort of voiceover control, and creators were absolutely clamoring for this. They desperately want it because it's so nice just to have your timeline created and then add voiceover right there in the software. So that has been added. We're going to talk about that quite a bit. And then the third thing I think that's worth pointing out is that they've now optimized the software to work better with the chips that are in these to then give you faster export time. So we're going to test that as well. Let's get to it. So grouping B-roll clips together, that's pretty basic. I don't think we need to get into that, but let's talk about the export times here. Okay, so this is M2 based iPad, and the Final Cut Pro software is designed now to optimize that chip and the built-in GPU just to process those files and export them faster. So to give context, I've got a 4-minute and 40-second 4K clip here at 30 frames per second. I'm gonna export it as H.264. Now, before the software update, this clip would take just over 3 minutes to process. Now that I do have the updated software, honestly, it's not that big a change. We're getting about 2 minutes and 45 seconds. I mean, that's a pretty minor improvement. And on shorter clips, I don't think it's going to really change your life that much. I do think, though, that if you have larger clips or more intensive footage, like 4K, 60 or 8K stuff, it might be a little bit faster. And we're going to see that on the desktop side especially. But let's take a closer look at the voiceover controls, because this, I think, is a big advantage. So basically, I've got another icon at the top now. Here's just a microphone. Click on that, and then it's going to bring up my audio levels immediately. I've got a record button there, and then I can change my input. I can use the iPad microphones, or I can plug a microphone in. I've got a meter there. I've got countdown if I want, a pre-record 4-second buffer if I find that helpful as well. And there's also an option to mute the timeline audio while I'm recording. So, if I don't have earbuds or anything, I can mute the timeline. It won't interfere. Or if I want, I can put headphones in, and then I can listen to the soundtrack in the background while I'm doing voiceover. You've got lots of options there. And I think this is a really nice improvement to have that a lot of people have been asking for. Now, I've got a little bit of a montage that I did here, and I just had music over it, but Jordan assures me that he wants to try the voiceover and make it far better. So, let's watch that now.
Oh, look at these beautiful landscapes, I bet. Wait, what is this? Boring water with a string in it? Oh, and we're going to wear camo out in bright days. That doesn't work. You're very difficult to see, Chris. And then now we've just got an animal with a hurt mouth, and now it's tired because its mouth got hurt, and it's in the water here. And you can do it. You can escape the horrible fisherman. Oh, thank God.
Okay, no, absolutely not. That was not better. That was not more dramatic. That was absolute garbage. I'm going to hit the Command Z button a few times here. And let's get on to other things that kind of still disappoint me, like Jordan. I can't have my footage on an external SSD and just plug it in and be able to work on a timeline off the external SSD. I think that would be a very convenient feature, so I'm absolutely looking forward to that coming out sometime soon. The other thing that we're still finding is that if Jordan and I want to mix and match files back and forth, we still can't do that. I can take projects from my iPad, send them over to his desktop, and then he can open them up, but we can't go back the other way. So he can't work on footage on the desktop and then give it to me to work on the iPad, and I really want to see that come to fruition. Anyways, that's it if you're using the iPad to do Final Cut Pro, but let's now go to Jordan. He's going to talk about what's changed for Final Cut on the desktop and MacBook.
Okay, Jordan here to talk about the updates to the desktop version of Final Cut. And before we get started, I just have to say I was on my way to a costume party. I forgot that I had to record this before the embargo, so apologize for the costume. So let's get into the details here. Okay, so let's kick things off with what I'd say is the biggest update, which is the new scrolling timeline. Now, previously, when you were running Final Cut and you were playing back your video, you would actually have to manually scroll the timeline forward. It wouldn't follow where the playhead was. Now, first of all, that's really tedious, but there were practical concerns as well, because as you were scrolling around while the video was playing or zooming in and out, you'd lose both your waveforms and your thumbnails, making it really hard to keep track of your edit. So I find myself scrolling a little bit, pausing the video so that thumbnails and waveforms can load, and then resuming playback. It's just a terrible system. And I don't think this is a hardware limitation. Like on my M2 Max laptop here, I'm able to cut 8K RAW with absolutely no slowdown. I think it should be able to load waveforms and thumbnails. So with the new scrolling timeline, as you play things back, it'll move through your timeline in time with the playback. But the really exciting thing for me is, as it moves through this, we still have our waveforms, we have our thumbnails. Even if we resize, it still properly displays it. So this is going to be absolutely fantastic when I'm at the end of a project. I just want to play it and double check all of my edits. This is absolutely the mode I'm going to use. But there are still a few disappointments. When Apple first previewed this for me and I could see the timeline and the thumbnails updating, I really hoped that they'd addressed the issues when the timeline is in its default scrolling mode. But unfortunately, no. If you're not using the scrolling timeline and you zoom or resize, you're still going to lose the waveform and thumbnail until you pause playback, which is really irritating. The second thing is, this scrolling timeline is something that I'm probably going to be toggling on and off quite regularly, but in order to do that, you actually have to go into the playback settings menu. I think it would be great if there was just a button, just like we see with our skimming features. Right here, you can see there's some space where this button could go that would toggle that scrolling timeline on and off. So Apple, please just give me a button in the next update. The other big update that is definitely going to impact me is the improved tracking support, where you can have text or an object follow a subject through the video. And this was introduced a few versions back, but I just never really had great success with it. With the previous version, I found that the tracking would just get really confused unless it was an extremely simple scene. And in those situations, I found it easier to just do the keyframing myself. So with the update here, I ran the same scene through it twice, and you can see where it failed before, it is now tracking the camera as Chris bounces it around in the frame. So basically, the tracking now works as advertised, and you can look forward to a bunch of bouncing text and arrows in our future PetaPixel episodes. The last major aspect of this update I really wanted to test are the improved export times if you're using Apple Silicon. And what it's actually going to do is split up your export into multiple chunks and then use all of the cores in your computer to render them out and combine them at the very last step. So since the desktop version of Final Cut is probably going to be used for more complicated, longer timelines, I wanted to test this with a pretty demanding project. It's our GFX 102 review. It's 22 minutes long. It's got piles of 100 megapixel images and a heavy grade applied to it. So exporting this project on an M2 Max MacBook Pro, it took 15 minutes and 32 seconds to kick that out with the previous version. But on the new 10.7 version, that export time dropped down to 11 minutes and 52 seconds. So this is a dramatic improvement to the export times if you're running some of the latest Apple computers. I kind of have mixed feelings about it because this means less time to make a sandwich or take a power nap when I'm exporting PetaPixel episodes. So there you go. These are the major updates to Final Cut for both iPad and for desktop. So please let us know in the comments below if you have any questions about those. And absolutely check out the PetaPixel podcast. It's right here on this channel, or you can listen to it on any of your favorite podcasting apps. Just search for the PetaPixel podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, follow us on our social media, and give this video a like. And stay tuned, because we're going to have a lot more episodes coming up for you soon on PetaPixel.